Fine. I'm not looking, please ignore my wife. Can I assume that was
send me an email.
Coffee lights, yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a
of the Exeter City Council. Welcome you all, members of the public. There will be one part 2 matter at the end of the meeting, which please do not take it personally when I ask you to leave. First thing to do is to take apologies, and we've got apologies for Councillor Kelly Mitchell,
Councillor Sutton and Councillor Ledbetter.
yes, just to say Rachel Sutton sadly lost her mum last week, and all our thoughts go to Rachel at this difficult time, and we will be seeing her back soon, no doubt. Okay, declarations of interest, item 3, please declare interest as appropriate. The item 4 I've mentioned, there is a part 2, item 16. Are you happy that I signed the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of September? Agreed? Okay, so those have been signed. And now we'll go straight into item 5, which is Council House Building Programme. And before we start, I've got Councillor Diana Moore speaking under Standing Order 44. Councillor Moore, if you'd like to come and speak to us, please.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you'll have a good debate on this issue, and I'm sure we all agree that more council housing is urgently needed, so I really welcome this move. I'm interested to know about the bodies that the council has set up to help deliver this, and work in partnership with others. I'm wanting to know what the impact on Exeter City Living business plan is of shifting sites back to the HRA, which is listed in paragraph 3.1. And for example, will it slow down in Exeter City Living's ability to build housing in the future? And although you've explained the mix of funding arrangements, and the funding will vary between schemes, I'm interested to know what the overall proportion of the 18 million is expected to be funded from borrowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, and if I can ask Councillor Laura Wright, the portfolio holder, to read your recommendations for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendations from this report are that we ask you to note the sites referred to in the report together with the timescales for delivery and the costs to complete each of the schemes. Members are asked to approve a budget totalling £18 million to deliver the sites detailed in the report, which will deliver 100 new homes into the HRA account. members are asked to note that the approval of future years' development activity will be via an annual council house building development plan and the annual capital programme budget report.
Okay, thank you. Bindu, would you like to add anything to that to talk to the paper?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say members will be aware that we have a council house stock of about 5,000 residential properties. We lose about 40 of those a year through right to buy. The government indicated an ability for us to borrow to build our own council housing, then to start a programme of assessing what our build programme might be over a 10-year period. So aspiration has been identified as being 500 homes over that 10-year period, and this is the first part of it. What I wanted to draw members' attention to is that following the lifting of the borrowing cap, officers have taken a step back to take a holistic view of how we approach our council housing. So we're commissioning a housing needs survey, the outcome which will be available later on this year, early next year. We spent some time doing a viability survey of our current stock to get a better idea of where we might want to invest. We have started to look at how we can look at doing low energy retrofits to improve the state of our current stock. So although absolutely an exciting opportunity for us to build more homes for local residents, it's also an opportunity for us to take a more holistic view of our existing stock.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright, I'll ask you to come in at the end, which you may want to answer any detailed points that members ask, and should you choose to pick up any of the issues that Councillor Moore may have raised. So I'm opening it up now to the other members for any contributions, observations, or otherwise. Councillor Morse.
We can only be supportive, really, of this scheme. Obviously, we're a Labour council, and we've been arguing for years that we wanted the HRA cap lifted so that we can start building some houses. The impact of right to buy is devastating on this council, really, for the choice of Devon Home Choice have massive waiting times at the moment. So I can't be anything but supportive of this. And I think actually we tried to be creative with the Exeter City Living in order to build some kind of housing that we had control over. It had a lot of other ambitions other than building social housing, and I think it's really important that we still recognise those ambitions stand. But the ability to have started some of those bits of work so that the HRA have now been able to buy some, or will be able to buy some of those in the future, that's a real positive for us, because actually we are taking some time to think about what we need to build and to make sure we have the right things in place to build it, but also that the HRA cap's been lifted and that we get to bring some of those houses into the system quicker. Wouldn't be there without Exeter City Living. So the grounds may have changed around us since we made that decision, but it's been quite good for us as well that we have those options. So totally welcome this, and I'm looking forward to seeing some houses built.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to hear this Zegas report go forward. I'm saddened to hear, as I often do, of the number of houses we lose every year under the right to buy scheme. And it has been brought to my attention that 95% nationwide, 95% of houses that have been bought under the right to buy scheme are now in fact in the hands of private landlords who rent them out for profit. Would either the portfolio holder or the lead director like to comment on that fact, and would like to say whether they think that's an appropriate method of things to happen or not?
Anybody else? Well, before you come in, Laura, I want to say, as a leader, and I just want to remind them the number of council-owned build that we've done here in Exeter over the years compared with a lot of others. The rest of the private development that we're doing with homes in Exeter, we've got programmes not just these 100 that we're doing through the HRA, the Exeter City Living, of course, will be producing homes for residents and people in Exeter. We've got good relationships with Live West, with some proposals coming forward in wards in Exeter, affordable social housing. And I think this is something to be actually welcomed, and we should be actually banging the drum about what we are doing here in Exeter. That's from my little old perspective. So I'll hand it over to Bindu and maybe Councillor Wright, if Bindu wants to add anything before. Okay. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Councillor Moore says, this is good news. I'd like to pick up on something that the leader has said that people have reported. I've seen the comments as well, such as, what, only 100? Are you kidding? That's nowhere near enough. Totally agree. Of course it's nowhere near enough. We know it isn't anywhere near enough, but it's a start, and we're making a start. And if this council hadn't managed to retain its housing stock so well than it has done over the years while we've been unable to build more, then it wouldn't be in a position now where it can actually put in a bid for borrowing in order to increase that stock. So I think it's worth saying thank you to the previous portfolio holders and directors that have actually really seen the importance of social housing, have managed to do so well to hold on to it and look after it. So we're in a good position. So the 100 is just the start. We're being careful, we're being prudential with the borrowing, as we should do, and as members we should make sure that that happens. And it is happening really well. And as Bindu has said, the initial bid for many more than 100 houses, for I think it was £108 million to start off with, was a bit of a toe in the water, test the water, to try and get what we could out of that. Then when the borrowing cap got lifted, there was time then to come back and know, well, we can borrow now, so let's do it properly. As well as doing the borrowing prudentially and scoping out appropriate sites, we're making sure that we have meaningful and proper consultation with residents as well, and that we're looking at proper neighbourhood building, which will also tie in with the Liverpool Exeter plans, the Garden City plans, so that we're not just saying we can bung 500 houses up here, so let's do it ASAP. It's part of the bigger picture for housing across the city. To pick up on Councillor Moore's point about the borrowing, the 18 million is a maximum amount. So if we can use right to buy receipts on any of the sites, then we have to use that for 30% of the site, so that the rest would be from borrowing. Alternatively, there might be grant funding for Homes England, but you can't use Homes England grants with right to buy receipts. So each site has got to be looked at separately and differently. So it's hard at this point to say exactly how much would be borrowed. But if you take that it's probably going to be around 70%, then that would be 12.6 million of borrowing, and the rest would be from grants or right to buy receipts.
Okay. Right, we've got the recommendations there. All those in favour of the recommendations? Okay, and there's nobody against. Thank you. We now move on to item 6, which is the options for the investment in the Exeter curbside and recycling service. And there are some recommendations here, and there is, I haven't skipped one of them. No, have I? No. There are some recommendations from the place scrutiny, or comments from the place scrutiny, which you've had that. I wish those to be noted as read, please. And so I'm going to now call on Councillor David Harvey to introduce the recommendations, and then we'll have the officer to run us through the details. Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Place Scrutiny Committee and Executive Committee recommend to Council the adoption of Option 4, which we've seen before, weekly curbside salt recycling collection incorporating glass and food waste collection, with 3 weekly rubbish collections and associated investment in materials reclamation facility. And that in service Option 4. Place Scrutiny Committee note an executive committee recommend to council that a budget of £200,000 is set aside from general revenue reserves to provide the project management and assistance with rollout. A capital budget of £2,105,000 is provided for the improved recycling containers, and a capital budget of £1.4 million to enhance the MRF. There are several things that I'd like to say before I bring the officers in. Firstly, that there is government consultation going on, and government are in the process of working out quite where they want to be about green waste and other sorts of waste, making the packager pay, and in terms of single-use plastic bottles, a deposit scheme. So there are further changes that are possible in the pipeline, which we're going to have to try and build into our schemes without actually knowing what the detail is. And secondly, already a considerable amount of work has been done by our officers. So far, last Thursday, several of us had the pleasure of inspecting a demonstration recycling lorry. I suspect it was more of a pleasure for some of us than others, but and as you can see there, and the recycling stacks or the recycling boxes with the blue things that are called cat flaps, so you can post your recycling in the stacks. So there's a considerable amount of work that's already gone on, but we are looking at and ensuring that insofar as we can, all the snags are ironed out before we set the service loose on the streets, including talking to our neighbouring councils and other councils across the country, and indeed in other countries, Wales, with regard to how they have rolled out the systems and what difficulties they encountered and how we can deal with those. So there are in fact some advantages with being possibly a late adopter of this particular type of scheme, and that others have already taken some steps there. But I think that's as far as I want to go, and I'll leave the officers to give you some further details.
Is it David or Simon? How are you going to... Simon, the prone owner of all these boxes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harvey basically said what I was going to say. Very concisely. We have booked some visits to other local authorities, both in Devon, Wales and further afield, so that should these recommendations proceed to full council and be approved, we'll be in a position to proceed with the project plan. Importantly, dealing with some of the issues that we know are raised, because there is no perfect recycling collection service. Every type of scheme used has its pros and cons, so we want to make sure we address some of the challenges with this particular scheme, learning from the early adopters elsewhere, and making sure that we've learned lessons from other people. And we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. Right, I'll open it up to members. Any throwaway comments at all? Councillor Morse.
I was one of the lucky people to get a guided tour of the recycling lorry last week, and it was genuinely very interesting. I'm not trying to make it into something it's not. It was really interesting to see that and to see the boxes. Actually, to have some of the conversations very early on when we looked at this, we were very negative about the boxes for recycling. It answered all the problems that I had with it. You know, it's a very secure way of storing the waste. It's not going to get blown around. It just works, and I'm sure that's a lot to do with the fact we are adopting a bit later and people have made mistakes along the way, but that's great. But the other interesting thing is, in the sort of third from the right, there was a food waste collection area, which Simon kindly showed us, opened it all up, and it had all manner of sludge and grime at the bottom of it, and water. They looked pretty disgusting, I have to say. It didn't really smell, which was really interesting, and it was about 3 or 4 days old, and I think that's something that we need to bear in mind. The smell coming out of that area for 4 days worth of food waste was nowhere near as bad as my black bin is after a fortnight. So I think, you know, that's something that we have to understand about the food waste. I know that we're all a bit squeamish about the idea we have it hanging around for a while, but actually we do already have it hanging around in our house for 2 weeks at a time, and actually that probably smelled better despite some really disgusting looking things inside it. So I can't, you know, I'm really pleased, because this is something we've looked into for so long, and we've had to put back on back burners and bring it forward because we didn't have the technology, or the money was the issue, or, you know, there were so many things that came up, and to be in a position now where we can make it all come together and we can start trialling it in areas. I'm really happy to provide something we promise we do, but I know that's going to make a lot of people happy. I just, we're going to have to manage the comms and the education a little while, because there will be people that will resent it when it first starts. But we've been there before. We brought in the 2 weekly recycling and black bins, and that didn't work so well. Well, it worked, but people weren't happy about it when it first started. So it's going to be an education, and hopefully everyone will like it as much as we do.
Oh yeah.
Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate Emma's point, I think it's been a long time coming, and it's really great to see. I think I've been politically, our Labour group was committed to this for a long time. But I've delivered a lot of leaflets committing to us introducing food collection, and it's great that our officers have found a way to make that happen, because it's something that, when we've been out talking to residents, we know that people want to have their glass collected, they want to have their food waste collected, and they, for a long time, have not understood why we can't do that. And it's been, as Emma said, a tricky one. It's been, the way that the city's been set up and the facilities we have, the money we have, has made it tricky to implement. But by sticking with it for the last 3 to 4 years, we've got there, hopefully, at last. Almost there, anyway. Thanks.
Okay. There's nobody else. I'm going to... Oh, Councillor Harvey, I was going to ask you to wrap up at the end, but yeah. But one thing I want to say is that we recently had an awards evening for staff here at the City Council, and it was very pleasing that the MRF sort of won an award for their work. Sometimes unrecognised, sometimes the amount of work. And Kareem and I had an opportunity to go somewhere. And just tell us, Kareem, the work with the production of that stuff that they've done at Glastonbury, how they recycle the stuff. I think a lot of people forget this, and I think it ought to be mentioned.
Sam will be closer than me, but you had the ocean recovery team working with one of our officers, which is basically producing from recycled plastics. What would you call it? Canoe? Kayaks. I'm not someone who uses boats. And actually a stage Glastonbury, which, as far as I'm aware, is the first stage of that kind ever constructed from recycled plastics. So they do a lot of things down in that facility, and one of those things is showcasing what can be done.
Yeah, thank you, Kareem. I just wanted us to sort of acknowledge and celebrate the work of our council employees. Actually, they go that one step more in the recycling programme. Councillor Harvey.
And I have some even more exciting news about recycling. Well. So, you can see there that it looks like we're going to have new recycling bins. Yeah? So I asked myself, what are we going to do with all the old ones? And we're going to collect them up and recycle them. That's what we're going to do with them all. Except that, now some of you in this room will know that I'm a keen allotmenter, right? And one of the problems in our allotments is watering your plot, because you're not allowed to have a pump to carry water. There are several troughs dotted around the sites, but it's quite a lot of water to carry about. Many people acquire guttering, which they attach to the sides of their sheds or their other buildings on their allotments, and they allow the water to come from the guttering through into a receptacle of some description. So what are we going to do? We're going to offer the old rubbish bins to people to put on their allotments to recycle grey water from the roofs of their buildings. Now, if that isn't a real step in the right direction towards recycling and reusing it, then I really don't know what is. Right. I think that's a splendid thing to do. It hasn't been sorted yet. It's going to the Allotments Forum on Thursday to see if there's any real appetite to do it. But that's the sort of thing, that's the sort of measure of the creativity and ingenuity we have amongst our staff to reuse stuff, because, as you may well know, that the waste hierarchy is to reduce the amount of waste that we deliver, that we create, to reuse stuff that we can. So this falls into that category of reusing stuff. and then recycle it at the top of the hierarchy. So we're making the efforts that we possibly can to move down the hierarchy as much as we possibly can. I think this is a great idea. I think it's fantastic. The guys are doing a tremendous job. There's an awful lot of work being done. We had a visit, two Thursdays ago, to an anaerobic digester out at Holsworthy, where they were doing all sorts of really amazing things with the waste products from the food waste. That's clearly a Devon issue as to where the food waste will go. But this is just a fantastic initiative, and I wish the guys will carry on and make every sort of success we can with it.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And you may guess we've got a portfolio there who's very into this sort of thing, and I welcome that. So we've got the recommendations, everybody. Are we all in favour of those recommendations? And that's a unanimous decision. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 7, which is the Carbon 2030 roadmap, and we've got notice by Councillor Moore to speak under Standing Order 44. Councillor Moore, if you'd like to come forward for this, please.
Thank you very much. This paper is really welcome because as we all know, we need full engagement by the community to make the rapid changes that we need to see. Some actions are going to be possible by communities themselves to make a difference on climate change. Some actions are only going to be possible and to be undertaken by the state, but the large majority of actions are going to require a partnership between authorities and communities. And I think it's really important that we're really clear about the expectations that we have as a local authority, and also to enable residents to be clear about how their time, their gifts, their talents and their commitment will be received and treated as part of this engagement. So I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about the engagement, about the purpose of the engagement, and will the principles and the process of this engagement be clearly outlined to participants before the process begins, including how the outputs of the process will be considered and by whom, so that the terms of reference are really clear. And one of the tricky questions is how will we engage with those who are already not engaged in this issue. It's very easy for people to turn up to events who already or always attend. And I'm just intrigued by a comment in paragraph 11.1 about a risk mentioned that members of Exeter City Futures CIC, the board, wouldn't support its work since they've clearly already approved it and are bringing this welcome paper here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier on, Councillor Sutton, who is the portfolio owner for climate change, is not here this evening. The recommendations are simple recommendations, which is to approve a budget of £30,000 for the project, for the roadmap to be completed. I'm not going to read out the reasons for the recommendation, which are quite clear in what this is. But I'm going to ask Liz O'Driscoll, who is the Exeter City Futures Programme Director, to talk us into that document and then if you talk to the document, Liz, I'll open it up for debate and I may ask you to come in at the end to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's really nice to be here to talk to you about this paper today. As you're probably aware, the Council have asked Exeter City Futures to work to establish this city plan or roadmap for delivery of carbon neutral city. And it's important that we develop this roadmap in a way that not only transitions us to a carbon neutral future, but also ensures that Exeter remains a really great place to live, regardless of whether you're a business or a resident. Now, I think it's important to understand that the commitment to becoming carbon neutral is absolutely massive. It is going to require the involvement of absolutely everybody across the city, from local authority through to businesses, right through to individual community groups. And inevitably, we can't escape the fact that many changes will be needed to be made by all of those groups and changes that will affect all of us in some way. So in order to ensure that we have the best chance of success of delivering the roadmap and of it being done in a way that is sustainable, in a way that sticks, to make this change, we have to ensure that we take the most appropriate steps to communicate and manage that transition. So we are asking in this paper for funding to support delivery of a series of events and engagement activities that will really work to identify and explore the barriers and the challenges that we'll need to overcome, and also to try to consider the types of solutions that people actually want to put forward in order to deliver the aspirations. So I think it's really exciting to think about obtaining some funding that can support me and the team to start to make this engagement and to design essentially what we'll call, for want of a better word, a carbon neutral series. So some formal and informal events, so workshops, talks, debates that really have to enable all sectors of the city to come together to start to think about this. We're hoping to work with some really exciting companies, some people that can help us to draw out the right principles of the process and the right communication that we need to be open and transparent and as engaging as possible with the widest number of groups. We can't deliver the roadmap on our own as a city council, and I hope you all agree with that statement. And it really, the roadmap will only be as good as the level of input we get. So we do need the full commitment of everybody across the city, including the members of the CIC and the wider partners and the individuals. And really, that's the subject of the report, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the floor, unless you want to say anything, John Paul, at this moment. Okay, I know Councillor Amal will be saying.
Yes, I'm really pleased with this report. I welcome it very much so, as an environmentalist myself, and I think it is a very good start, especially coming just within 2 months of the City Council announcing climate emergency. I would like to ask both John Paul and Ms. Driscoll is about some of the activities they would like to do. They have to be, I think, innovative, especially in particular areas where engagement with the idea of changing your lifestyle, what you do every day, is quite difficult. So I would like to see what kind of events. Don't tell me about just talks, because talks and lectures and things like that can be sometimes won't engage everyone. I would like just to see, do you have any ideas about what sort of type of activities that you will engage people who are usually quite unwilling to change the way they live, basically?
Thank you. Maybe do you want to answer that now, Liz, or do you want to wrap them all up at the end? Go on, Liz.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points there, and certainly from the work that I've been doing over the past couple of years, I can see people engaging really intellectually with the climate change emergency, but I'm less sure how much realisation truly people have made about, from the gut, what that means for them. So I think that's a really important area to tackle. What I'm hoping is that we can find some exciting partners and companies that we can work with that can really bring forward some more innovative ideas perhaps than the standard, and certainly we can look across at other cities and what they're doing, and ideas like talks obviously come up, but you're right, what is that other thing that really creates that meaningful engagement. So that's really a lot of the purpose of reaching out with this funding, is to find somebody who's able to come up with some ideas for that.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this. I was very pleased, as we all were, when we declared a climate emergency. Not that us declaring it made it exist, because obviously it existed before a political statement. But it wasn't just that we were making a political statement. We've actually agreed to try and put some funding into having a group work on finding how we can all actually reduce our own carbon footprint, but also how businesses can be involved with this, and very importantly, traffic and infrastructure. So I'm pleased to see the 10.2 on the report, which mentions that part, which is very, very important for all of us. I've just got myself an electric bike on the travel to work, the bike to work scheme. Thank you, Democratic Services. So I'm going to have to ride it now. But I'm very conscious, you know, when I'm driving around, thinking, ooh, there's still cycle routes that we really need to get some decent cycle routes so that it's safe for people to cycle. So I'm sure a lot of this will come up for the consultation. But I'm really pleased to see that we're actually going, after you've consulted with everybody and involved people, it's the word solution that you used earlier on. I'm really pleased to hear about that. We are then going to find solutions and really put the work in for this rather than just declare the climate emergency. So totally in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. John Paul.
Just to add that we've behind the scenes, since you declared the climate emergency, we've gone out to tender to try and make first steps as best we can in terms of the kinds of consultations that the councillors are talking about, and to do that in effective ways. What's really reassuring for me is the steps that have gone before that. So we've looked at the process of where we are and the foresight that members have had over the past couple of years investing in this. That I really hope this will be some culmination of that and will help produce this roadmap.
Okay. I want to, from the chair, just remind the importance of this and the work that's being done and ongoing. It's unfortunate that I'd love to be able to sit down with the Chief Executive and say we're going to put resources here and resources there and resources for that. I really would want to do that. I'd be faced with what do we not do if that's the case. And I'm hoping that we will get proper funding at some stage from government to be able to deliver some of all these aspirations. We're going to be working with the County Council. Don't forget, I've got an input into the County Council. We're not on our own doing this, but I'm very mindful as civic leaders, we have to demonstrate, and I'm very proud of you, Laura Wright, in getting yourself an electric bike. Do purchase a helmet, most important. And I lay that challenge down to the rest of the councillors here to get on your bike, because I think we need to lead by example. There's 4 phases in this report, 3 main phases that we're talking about. I think that's very important, but this isn't the end. People are still looking to try to find out what's wrong with what we're doing. I say just have a look at what's right with what we're doing for a little while. We're on a long journey between now and 2030. Even government aren't recognising, and some of the top scientists that we've had in this room are recognising 2030 is going to be very, very difficult. But as a city council, our aim is to become dependent by 2022, and we're working towards that, and we're going to do that. We're going to lead by example in this authority. And hopefully, as we go on, we're building up, although this isn't the matter for this agenda, Kareem, a steering board for livable Exeter. Inevitably, these partners, will be talking to these partners about climate issues as we bring forward those things. We have the aspiration, we have the political will to want to effect change in this city. We're working with our other partners. We want to engage people like Stagecoach. They're on to what they call Euro 5 and Euro 6 buses. They may well be diesel, but they're very efficient, and we need to be engaging these people. Railways, transport, cars, congestion, all these things, and businesses in and around Exeter, supporting businesses on developing green travel plans. Actually working through our Sport England pilot also connects into this. Leading healthy, active lives. Well, that could be how you get to and fro work. All these things are linked. It's a big project, and hopefully at council, when this comes up, I will hopefully be able to say something on something further, in which what support internally, politically wise, that I want to be able to take that forward. I just want to say to people, it's a very important subject. It's not just dear to my heart, it's dear to all our hearts. Right down to single-use plastic, we've got to do better we will do better. So yes, this file, when it goes into my file rack, I will be reusing the plastic sleeves on this file in other documents. And I won't be just sticking it up there and not using it. So I'm mindful about all these things. That's the recommendation. We're going to be hearing a lot more about this, and I'm hoping it's one of the issues that on an item that comes up on how we re-look at our constitution, on one of the major projects that hopefully one of the scrutiny committees will take on board in taking it forward. So there's the recommendation. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you very much. That's agreed. So, we now move on to the Council's Annual Health and Safety Report for 2018, and we've got two recommendations, but scrutiny has given us an additional recommendation. Just bear with me a moment while I apply it. Yeah, so those are the two recommendations that Corporate Service Scrutiny notes the content of the report, the Executive notes also the annual report, and that the Chief Executive, the Growth Director, and the Leader of the Council be named as joint owners of the report. And I'm going to ask David Bartram to tell us what he has got me and Kareem into. Dave Hodgson, is it? What have you got us into?
Thank you, Chair. It's fairly straightforward. This is just the annual report of health and safety at Exeter for 2018. It's an annual report that's received each year. So I don't think there's anything to concern yourselves about signing off. You sign off the health and safety certificate for the council in any case. In terms of the report, I think the key issue to note is that the number of reportable accidents at the council halved in 2018 from 16 to 8. I think that's a really positive step, and that's all I really want to say about the report. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, David. I think that is good news. As somebody in a former life spent many a meeting in health and safety meetings, and actually overseeing the decline in railway accidents and with transport workers. I welcome to see any accidents reduced. I see there's two. Yeah, there's. So we've got that recommendation. Is there anybody else wants to speak on it? Councillor Fole.
Thank you, Chair. The reduction by 50% of the incidents is very impressive. Can we put a finger on why that has happened? Is it a coincidence or through some new initiative we've taken?
Yeah, David Barker.
I think there's just been greater emphasis on health and safety. So we've got the new Health and Safety Committee, and all the directors and Strategic Management Board attend that Health and Safety Committee. So when things are raised, they're actioned very quickly. So it just means that there's greater emphasis, there's a greater number of inspections. The vast majority of incidents and accidents occur in my services because they're generally the frontline riskier services. And we've worked very hard on improving working conditions at Belle Isle, for example. So we've done a lot of safety improvement work there over the last year or two. And it's just this constant focus on how we do the job and making sure that we do it as safely as possible.
Thank you. A side issue, Chair, was noting that there's not an expectation but a recognition that more flexible working might lead to more stress. Is there any evidence of that so far as things change?
I don't know which officer would deal with that. I feel sure we can get that back. Kareem?
I think it's fair to say that stress generally in the workplace is going up. However, we can't say whether that's a direct result of the new agile work process yet.
I would say that things that we're doing is designed to minimise any kind of risk of stress. We're doing an awful lot with the staff in terms of our engagement, the workshops, I've never seen us on any corporate initiative throw so much resource at supporting the staff through this change exercise. And so I would, whatever happens, there's always conditions affecting the public sector with the pressures that we're under. But as far as delivering this initiative is concerned, I think we're doing everything we can to design to minimise any risk of stress from this exercise.
Thank you, Kareem. I only asked because you quite rightly had flagged it up in the report that it was a potential area of concern, but there's no evidence as yet that that's biting in. Thank you.
Dave Hodgson.
I do have quite a long answer. The question was raised at Corporate Services about the stress. I do have quite a long answer, which I'm happy to send out to all members to let you know how we're addressing that.
Okay, are we all in favour of the recommendations? Please show. That's agreed unanimously, thank you. Item 9, overview of the General Fund Revenue Budget 2019-2020, quarter 1. David, and we've got 4 recommendations there, plus 2 additional from scrutiny. If you'd like to talk us through it all in the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first quarter budget monitoring in respect of the General Fund. Very much on track, nothing significant to report from the first quarter's budget monitoring. Very slight underspend being projected. In terms of the recommendations, most of them to note, the key one is recommendation 2, that supplementary budgets of £493,930 and the budget variants also set out in the appendix are to be recommended to Council for approval. Of the 493,000 that we're requesting in supplementary budgets, only 78,500 will be taken from the General Fund working balance. The rest will be financed either from neighbourhood sale or from earmarked reserves. The variants are just transfers of budget from one area to another that either exceed our limits within financial regulations or are being transferred from one director's area to another and therefore require full council approval. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, David. Any questions? No? Okay, all those in favour of the recommendations, please show. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 10, which is the 2019-2020 General Fund Capital Monitoring Statement Quarter, and there's just a Corporate Service Committee comment on this. 2 recommendations. Dave, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, fairly brief. Key things to note. General Fund Capital Programme, it now stands at £42.5 million, which I think is possibly the biggest General Fund Capital Programme Exeter's ever experienced. And that's reflected in the amount spent in the first quarter. We spent £5.5 million in the first quarter, which compares to £657,000 at the same stage of the previous year. As members are well aware, the significant projects are well underway and being delivered at the moment. Again, in respect of key decisions, there is a further funding request. This is for a budget of £600,000 in respect of the Agile and Flexible Working. The money that will finance it has already been approved by Council. It's part of the Transformation Fund that was approved last year. This is simply a request for the capital budget to be put in place. As members will recall, you have a responsibility to approve all expenditure. So this is requesting the budget to spend the money that you've already set aside. And again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any comments on that? If not, all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Right, on to item 11, which is the 2019-2020 HRA Budget Monitoring Report, Quarter 1. We've got 2 recommendations, and there is an additional one there on the HRA budget, which the additional is from scrutiny that the HRA budget to recognise the importance of replanting trees and an allocation for tree planting be included in the budget. David.
Thanks, Chair. Even more brief on the HRA, this is the HRA Budget Monitoring Report, which incorporates both the revenue position and capital programme for the housing revenue account. Very much on track at the end of the first quarter. The only significant variance is a slight increase in capital charges, which are effectively depreciation charged against the value of the assets. I'm pleased to say that money is set aside and can be spent as capital expenditure to further enhance our existing properties. So it will be good, put to good use. There was an additional request to consider a budget for tree planting. We appointed a tree officer within the housing revenue account. I think there's wider work being undertaken along with public realm in respect of addressing the issue with trees and to enable tree planting to take place. And I'm sure that will be worked on. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no contributions, all those in favour of the report and the additional recommendation, please show. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on to item 12, which is the review of the polling districts and polling places within the Exeter City Council area. You will see there's 3 recommendations. John Street, are you going to talk to this one for us, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this is a statutory requirement that we need to do this each and every 4 years. So it's basically looking at how the population densities are within the city and also ensuring that wherever possible those marry up quite well with our polling areas, together with looking at availability of polling stations so that where possible we ensure that the population who go out and vote have the opportunity to do this. This is a public consultation exercise. We went out to public consultation. We had the grand total of 2 responses, both of which have been taken into account, one of which was leave Allwell Garth where it is rather than go to try and use Willowbrook School instead, which is slightly outside of the polling district. And the other one was the unsuitability of the 7 Stars or car park of the 7 Stars public house as a polling station for a temporary polling station, which you'll see from the report has now been amalgamated into a double station at the school instead. You will also notice that I always try to avoid using schools for polling stations wherever possible, but that's not always possible because of the lack of suitable alternative premises. But I will make the point that whilst I have got a statutory right to use polling stations schools for polling stations, it is the school's decision at the end of the day as to whether the school should stay open or not. And we are lucky in the city that 80% of the schools find a way to remain open on polling day. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions? All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. That's carried unanimously. And we now move on to item 13, which is the governance review. And I've got Councillor Diana Moore speaking under Standing Order 14. Councillor.
Thank you. I'm wondering whether the proposals reduce opportunities to both inform and scrutinise the executive. In paragraph 1, appendix 1, paragraph 1, a stated aim is to hold the executive to account, but this is not reflected in the terms of reference for the scrutiny committees at the bottom of the first page. As the executive and scrutiny chairs will be councillors from the ruling group, and council will appoint the vice chairs, to what extent do you think the new arrangements will be effective in achieving the stated aim in appendix 1, paragraph 1, to hold the executive to account? I'm also wondering about the terms of reference. which includes some council partnerships and connected groups and organisations as part of the council's scrutiny. So I'm wondering if Exeter City Living, Exeter City Group Limited, Exeter City Futures, as companies connected with and key to delivering the council's work, should be listed as partner bodies for scrutiny. The provisions for public questions are mixed. The new right to ask questions at council and executive is welcome. So in 36 words, do you think that the 50-word limit on questions favours those whose command of English is higher than average and increases opportunities for evasive answers, as there will be little room for any context to be explained?
Okay, thank you. I want now Councillor Hannaford to come forward from the Standing Order under 44. And why we've asked Councillor Hannaford to come forward is he did chair the panel which was politically balanced that discussed this along with the officers. So I want you to tell us a bit about your conclusions, and then obviously I've got Barn coming in with the legal thing at the end. Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to take you down through some of the key points of the report. In terms of 2.2 and the deletion of the Exeter Convention, that was obviously a convention that was built up over some time when we effectively had quite a robust four-party system on the council and marginal control. I do think now it is quite right that the executive is expanded and it is one party, because I don't want to forecast the decline of our political fortunes in the council, but nevertheless a group is two councillors. It's not a pairing, it's a group is two. So therefore we could perhaps see, not unreasonably, that your capacity as a leader in terms of your executive could be quite easily stripped out by having groups of two represented on the executive. And I think we are concerned that, in terms of good governance and responsibility of the council, you need your personnel in those executive roles to actually effectively run the council in a proper way. Particularly, for example, with stockholding authority, and it's a very ambitious council in terms of economic development and planning and all the rest of it. So you have to have a full and robust team around you. I think that the formalising of the role of the leaders of the opposition is right, so that they will be able to come along, as is happening today, and speak and participate and make their points to the executive. And I think that's the balance that we need to work on in terms of the executive. And I think just to again confirm, because there was a bit of talk about removing that capacity under Standing Order 44, and that is not the case. That is remaining. That's not been taken away and diverted elsewhere. That is still there. In terms of 2.3, in regard to the council scrutiny arrangements, I think the new model will allow a more focused approach. I think that we are looking really for a step change in scrutiny at the City Council, where it is much more active, it's much more proactive in many ways. And I have to say, I think we need to reboot it so that scrutiny is respected and its contributions are valued and it brings added value. It's there as a critical friend. It's not so much about the knockabout or seen as an opposition vehicle, because that is work really that is done at the full council. This is to add value to the governance of the council. In terms of more capacity, in terms of the new allowances potentially for the vice chair's role, I think there's the anticipation following that route down that the vice chairs will take a more active role. They'll be doing task and finish group spotlight reviews, they'll be doing overview work. So therefore that is the theory behind that. So and also to empower backbench councillors so that they can take on pieces of work as and when the business presents itself. Because at the end of the day, I think we all understand the administration is only as good as the scrutiny and the opposition it gets. It needs to be kept on its toes. It needs to be asked probing questions in a respectful, professional way, obviously. But nevertheless, it needs a robust challenge. And I think if that doesn't happen, or deteriorates, I think then that's when potentially bad decisions get made or things aren't done properly. And I think as well it could be even a case of, when new policies and new things come out, it could be the fact that it's referred to scrutiny for the scrutiny to have a look at it, have a look at the documents, consultation things that are going out. So I think we're looking for a real step change there. In terms of the balance between the ruling party and the opposition members, I take the points from Councillor Moore, but it really depends on the attitude and the capabilities and the skills of the chair. I still think if you've got a majority chair, provided they're approaching it in the right way, they can still provide good, robust scrutiny. And in some ways, in another place, I've seen where the chair is a majority member of the administration, they can almost have an even more robust debate with cabinet members and say, well, look, what are we doing here? In terms of public participation, I think we are doing this in the interest of openness and transparency. We didn't really pursue this a few years ago. It's probably more than a few years ago now when it came up, because we have the facility at the Exeter board, which is a joint city and county committee where public questions could be asked. But I think now what is being proposed is right. I think the recommendation from the report that we've put before you is we're going to look at how it runs, perhaps for 6 or 12 months, for a further assessment to see if the number of words in the question is right, if the time length is right. I think we've put the right safeguards in, so it's not going to be hopefully abused by the sort of usual suspects putting in multiple questions about multiple things. And if there is a follow-up, then that has to be related to the first question. And I don't think that's something that we need to be afraid of. I think when this came up as a suggestion, I, amongst others, thought that you, leader, would actually quite relish having a public question time and be asked almost anything. And the reality is that those of us who, particularly those of us that live in our communities represent, I can get on the A bus and I can be asked anything any time of the day anyway, or down the co-op anyway. So I mean, why are we afraid of it in a formal context of the council where we've got so many days working notice and officer reports? So I mean, I think that's what we're aiming for. It's an open council that's working with the community. I do support the recommendations about opposition leaders still having their extra allowances, because before it was predicated on the fact that they had the members of the executive. If the leaders of the opposition are taking their roles seriously, that will involve media time, it will involve research time, and also additional meetings externally within their parties and with the wider community. So that is a recognition again that it's the balance between, on the one hand, a one-party executive, but on the other hand, balancing up scrutiny and respecting the roles of the opposition groups. So I think that's important. Section 4, I think, is also key about looking at reinstating the scrutiny capacity, because that then backs up all what we've been talking about having a better, more robust scrutiny position. I think the work that Anne-Marie was doing before she moved, a lot of it was excellent, about green travel plans and all sorts of things, and we need to get back into that role again, and it's again showing that we're taking this issue seriously. I think the overall summary on section 8 actually covers most of the key changes. I think one of the thoughts as well in terms of the numbers on scrutiny, as if it goes up to 14, that will also potentially be easier to form working parties and to get people to come forward, because we've got a bigger pool of people there. And I think on 93, which regards the delegated authorities, I think it was necessary for a bit of a reality check, because we all know this debate about who signs it off and who actually makes the decision, but the reality is many times if it goes to one of the executive members, I know from my own experience, if we in consultation leaders say, well actually we don't think that's going to happen, or that's not a good idea, the reality is that's probably not going to happen. And I think that needs to be that right balance between officers advising and members deciding, which is very key for the local authority. So happy to just put that in front of you. Hopefully this will go through full council. I think hopefully we've struck the right balance between making sure that the administration has a clear line of decision making and capacity in terms of the council, but while also respecting the opposition and scrutiny, and most importantly of all, the backbench role as well, which I think is very important when we have a lot of backbenchers. The group is an ad hoc group, so we tend to be meeting as and when. So some of the things here will need to be fine-tuned, or for example in 6 months' time, if we have a look at the question time, that will come back to us. And very lastly, Leader, just take this opportunity to say, in regards to the mention here about outside bodies and key agencies, I think what we're doing there is we want direct feedback from all elected members to say, you are on this body, you're on this charity, do you value it? Do you feel that you bring value, added value to it? Is it assessment again? So it really has that has that communication goes out, because we will be then assessing those feedbacks. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Barn, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that Councillor Hannaford has drawn out the main points of the working group that's met over the summer period. But if I may, I'd like to just highlight the main points which we are suggesting should be put forward to the full council for approval by way of changes to the constitution, and those recommendations are as follows. The first one is that the executive should be moved towards a single party executive with a maximum of 10 members, and that a cultural change will be embedded by inviting opposition leaders to have a right to speak at the executive without having to give notice under Standing Order 44. In relation to scrutiny, the suggestion before you as a recommendation to full council is that we reduce the number of scrutiny committees from 3 to 2, and we introduce 2 new scrutinies, one with a strategic scrutiny and the second being customer focused scrutiny. To lead the work of both scrutiny committees, the proposal is to set up a scrutiny programme board to be chaired by the chair and vice chair of each of the 2 scrutiny committees, and one other member to be nominated by the leader. And in order to speed up the decision-making process in the council, the proposal is to remove the pre-scrutiny convention, so that you'll see in future, assuming this is agreed in full council, all reports will go directly to the executive. The proposal, and members felt very strongly about this, so the proposal is that members would like to enhance public engagement, and as a result, members were very happy to see that it expand the right for members of the public to ask questions, and now inviting questions from the public at the Executive Council and the scrutiny committees. Obviously, in terms of reference set out the conventions in relation to those. So, assuming those changes go forward, there are recommendations in relation to members' allowances, and those recommendations went to an independent member panel which met yesterday, and I propose I hand over to John, who can summarise what that panel recommended.
Thank you, Barn. Thank you, Leader. This the independent remuneration panel met yesterday, as Barn suggested, to consider the implications of the recommendations coming out of the Working Party, and its recommendations are as follows. These will be in the full minutes, go to the council next week, Leader. That a new allowance be payable to opposition group leaders where a group of 2 members on the council receives an allowance equivalent to 20% of the basic allowance. A group of between 3 and 5 group leader would receive an allowance equivalent to 50% of the basic allowance, and a group of 6 or more would a group leader would receive an allowance equivalent to 60% of the basic allowance. It was also an expectation of the independent remuneration panel that the leader of the largest political group be also the leader of the council. It was also recommended that the 2 deputy chairs of the 2 new scrutiny committees and of the planning committee receive a special responsibility allowance equivalent to 50% of the basic allowance. But it does note that if all of the posts eligible for the payment of a special responsibility allowance were paid to individuals, which often isn't the case in the council, but we have to budget for such, then that would potentially amount to a total of 23 special responsibility allowances being payable, which is above the 50% threshold, which has previously been suggested as a good practice. The panel therefore suggested that a review of this and the operation of the new governance system be undertaken in September 2020, when it will be seeking interviews from a cross-section of councillors and particularly special responsibility allowance recipients. The panel was also very pleased to see the adoption of the parental leave scheme that the council approved in April of this year. I've done a calculation as to the additional costs that may well be, and you'll see within the report that we're suggesting that there would be a maximum of 20,000. My calculation estimates that that would be 14,000, not the 20,000. Could I also just quickly go on to say that it's recommended that this new structure be implemented with effect from next week. So there's been quite a lot of work being done in the background to get all the administrative tasks associated with a new schedule of meetings and where the various reports would go to. It's my intention that over the next couple of days a draft revised calendar of meetings will be sent out, picking up all the dates of the 2 new scrutiny committees. That's trying to give councillors as much notice of the changes that there may well be, but obviously not prejudicing or prejudging. The council will still make the decision next week, but I'm trying to get as much notice out as possible of those potential changes that there would be. It's mainly about scrutiny going down from 2 to 3, but which new scrutiny committees would be put on which date, and we'll also be seeking the leaders of the groups for their nominations for those positions to go onto the scrutiny committees, and the chairs and deputy chairs of that, so that it can be approved by council next week. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, just to clarify, so the recommendation in 262, we'd like to amend to bring down the budget, the additional budget we're seeking from 20k to 14,000. Happy to take that.
Thank you, Bon. I'd like to thank everybody for the work involved and for the independent panel in bringing forward their recommendations. I think a lot of work is being done and needs to continue to be done. I know the background to updating the Constitution will be important. I think we are reflecting what happens now in similar local authorities of similar size and a similar political balance. As Councillor Hannaford said, it was predicated once before on an overall control, and there was need to work that way. There are also meetings that go on, and I can say I meet regularly with the opposition group leaders. Those group leaders have been supportive of these changes and have contributed to the ideas, and those ideas have been brought on side, which is what proper discussion, grown-up discussion should be, so I was very pleased to see that. I can report that Andrew Ledbetter sent me an email, although we have not amended the Constitution to allow for proxy votes to take place at any meeting. He has indicated to me that he is supportive, his group is supportive of the changes, and I welcome that support. And Councillor Mitchell is not here tonight, but he indicated to me that the Progressive group were also supportive. I want to do this through consensus. I'm trying to, hopefully, as I've spoken to a lot of members, to try to professionalise how councillors work. I think we receive allowances, we should do a proper job and earn those allowances. I'm bound to say I believe the overwhelming majority, if not all of us, do earn those allowances with the work we do, not just in these chambers or in this building, but also in the communities which we represent. As for questions of 50 words or more, I understand that is the norm, and many other councils have adopted that, and it seems to work. It is an area we will look. I mean, I can answer questions with 1 word or even 2 words if necessary, but I try to elaborate a little bit longer than that. And of course, and if somebody does present a question to us in writing, which is more than 50 words, who may not be, as one of the references was made, whether or not somebody may not be educationally wherever, we're not just going to churn that out. And I would be, John, severely and bitterly disappointed if I heard that your office had rejected. I think you would, as I would know you would, you'll go back to that person and you will say, and you would most probably help them, and you would most probably help them praise it. That is what we want to do in this council. We are not putting up rules or methods to exclude people. We want to include people, but we have to be sensible about these things. I've seen 5 pages of notices of motion or questions. We are not going to descend into that. We will get answers to people. That's exactly as Councillor Hannaford said, whether it's the A bus or wherever we met, or the railway club, or wherever we end up taking questions from the public, we want to be doing that. And as for whether it's the administration, actually people need to actually read the rules, and what we're proposing is actually there is no reference to ruling groups or minority groups. Chairs and vice chairs come forward as a consequences of discussions with the other groups. That's how it's coming. That means there's consensus. That means there's agreement. And so that's why how I want us, and I know the Labour group wants to see, we have got 29 seats. We are the majority party. Some people like to use the derogatory term as ruling party. We are the majority party. We've been elected to represent people in Exeter. We will carry out that function, but we are not excluding any other councillor or member, and I would defy them to suggest that we are doing that in this administration, and we're not. So I'm hoping that this will go through with unanimous support. We'd be bitterly disappointed if it didn't, and we will work through together with all the parties. And if we need to enact changes as we go for common sense, that's what we do. I mean, rules are for fools, but for guidance of wise people. And if we have to, amend something and look forward to another way of doing it, that's exactly what we're going to do. So enough of that. All those in favour? That's agreed unanimously then. So we'll now move on to item 14, which is the Heart of the South West Joint Committee Governance Review update. This is to it. Kareem, I'd like you to do this one.
All the district councils in Devon and Somerset, together with the unitary councils, Staffordshire councils of Plymouth, Torbay, Devon, Somerset, and the 2 national parks, comprise the Heart of the South West Council's Joint Committee. Started early 2018, so some 18 months later, the leaders have reflected on their terms of reference and have seen that they need to make some amendments, and the proposal is set out in page 99 in bold, and basically reflects where we are as a joint committee, which is we've submitted via the local enterprise partnership to Whitehall the local industrial strategy, which hopefully will get signed off. And the councils want to be in a position, should that get supported by Whitehall, that we're able then to work to bring forward a pipeline of projects which will flow from that work and the productivity strategy. So the councils want to be in a position to deal with government, to give effectively powers to the council to have that negotiation with government and to move in an agile fashion, and also to respond in the way that in the past when deals have been put together, they need to respond fairly quickly to proposals that come from government. So they're the proposed changes, together with the fact that they've asked for us to increase the membership, if you like, so doubling the contribution that we make from £1,400 to £2,800. That money is available in the budget for this year. Thereafter, our budget would need to reflect the fact that that increase is being made. So I think the recommendation from my point of view, Chair, is to support this.
Anybody got any questions or contributions on that? If not, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's carried unanimously. We'll move on to item 15, which is the amendment to the Treasury Management Strategy. David Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. 2 weeks ago, Section 151 officer, in consultation with yourself, undertook to borrow £49.5 million long-term from the Public Works Loans Board. This enabled us to back our underlying need to borrow with borrowing. There's a range of loans, 3 loans that have been undertaken at very low interest rates, almost historically low interest rates. That will give us certainty in our financial position going forward. However, it does raise the fact that we now have £14.5 million and we need to place that money with a range of institutions in order to minimise risk. Our current treasury management strategy isn't quite at a level that would enable us to do that, so we're seeking just a couple of small amendments to the existing policy. I would say to members the money is currently being placed with the DMO, which is part of the Treasury, central government, which we have no limit with the amount of money we can place with central government. So the money is safely deposited with probably the highest rated institution in the country at this moment in time. Just 2 amendments being sought. Firstly, to increase the money market funds monetary limit from £5 million to £10 million. Money markets are good because essentially you place funds in money in a fund, and that's then placed with a range of different institutions. So if you have £10 million, it may be placed over 20 or 25 different institutions. So the amount of your exposure, if any one institution was to be in financial trouble, would be low. So we're seeking an increase to £10 million in those. The other change is to increase the lower tier, the amount we will lend to other lower tier authorities from 3 million to 5 million. We did have a split between upper tier and lower tier. Actually, there's no particular need for that split. In many cases, most of the reported challenges in terms of finances have been with upper tier authorities for obvious reasons over previous cases. So we're just seeking those 2 amendments so that we can place the money more widely than just placing it with the DMO, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions, contributions? Councillor Hussain.
I just want the officer to explain that again to me. What do you mean by the upper tier and lower tier? I don't understand that.
Sorry. District. Local government split into 2 tiers. The government call them upper tier and lower tier. Upper tier authorities are the unitary councils and the county councils, councils that have responsibility for social care, education and highways. Lower tier are district councils like Exeter City Council, the councils that look after waste and planning. Councils, unitary councils, look after the range of both, but they're also classed as upper tier. So they're the ones that have got a bigger budget, much bigger budget, because it incorporates social care.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's agreed unanimously. Okay, so that's the end of this evening's meeting. It's been sorry, to the public I'm on about, to wish them all a happy Halloween.